Marcus Hensley stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching baby Jalen sleep, his fists clenched, his eyes empty, while Olivia brewed coffee in the kitchen, unaware that within minutes, her entire world would be shattered beyond recognition. This was not an accident. This was the beginning of a nightmare rooted in jealousy, silence, and one man's twisted idea of love. On the outside, the Altons lived a dream life, one that many envied but few truly understood. Their high-rise apartment stood tall against the Chicago skyline, the kind of place reserved for couples with a firm grip on life. Olivia Alton, a 27-year-old pediatric nurse, had the kind of quiet strength people admired. She worked long hours at a children's hospital, but still found time to bake cupcakes on Sundays and volunteer at church drives. People often called her the angel in scrubs. Her fiancé, Marcus Hensley, was less visible in the community but seemed supportive and proud. Tall, muscular, with close-cropped hair and a quiet demeanor, he worked construction, usually leaving early in the morning and returning late. Whenever people saw him with Olivia and the baby Jalen, they looked like a family out of a parenting magazine. Perfect, smiling, untroubled. But photographs don't show tension, videos don't capture resentment growing in the silence. And no filter can soften the invisible cracks in a relationship held together by appearance rather than affection. Olivia met Marcus during her second trimester. Her child's biological father had walked out when he learned she was pregnant. The heartbreak had nearly crushed her, but Marcus showed up when she least expected it. Calm, attentive, and seemingly unfazed by her situation. He promised her, "It didn't matter. Family is what you choose," he once wrote in a birthday card. And Olivia chose to believe him. By the time Jalen was born, they had moved into the 15th floor apartment, a clean, modern space with hardwood floors, tall windows, and a nursery painted soft blue. Neighbors would sometimes hear Olivia humming lullabies through the walls as she rocked Jalen to sleep. Others caught fleeting glimpses of Marcus pushing the stroller through the lobby, nodding politely but never stopping for small talk. From a distance, their life was a picture of stability. But inside that apartment, something was shifting. It began with small, almost imperceptible changes. Marcus stopped offering to feed the baby. He avoided changing diapers. When Olivia brought Jalen into the room, Marcus would find a reason to leave. She noticed but never asked why. She assumed he was just adjusting to fatherhood. After all, this wasn't his child by blood. She reasoned that maybe the connection just needed time. Then came the silence. Long evenings where Olivia tried to share stories about her day or ask about his, but Marcus barely responded. He often stared past her or scrolled through his phone, distracted and distant. Once, she caught him glaring at the crib while the baby napped. He looked away quickly, but the chill it sent down her spine stayed with her for hours. She told herself she was imagining things, that postpartum hormones made her too sensitive, that every couple went through quiet spells. But the silence turned heavier. Marcus began staying out late, sometimes not returning until early morning. He said it was overtime. She wanted to believe him. Behind the doors of the nursery, Jalen cooed and gurgled, blissfully unaware. He had just learned to sit up on his own, a tiny triumph that Olivia recorded on her phone and tried to show Marcus that evening. He watched it for half a second, nodded, and returned to his drink. What Olivia didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was how much Marcus resented every moment of her joy. In his mind, Jalen represented everything he could never be, a bond he could never have, a love he could never earn. No one suspected how much that thought ate at him, day after day, and every time he walked past the open window of the nursery, he paused just a little longer. Not long enough to raise alarm, but long enough to make a plan. None of the neighbors noticed. No one heard arguments, no warning signs, just quiet, the kind of quiet that makes people assume everything is fine. But sometimes silence is where the darkest thoughts are born. The first signs of something deeper, Something dangerous began to take shape not long after Jalen turned 6 months old. It started with Marcus becoming increasingly possessive of Olivia, but not in ways that seemed immediately alarming. He didn't forbid her from seeing friends or family. Instead, he subtly discouraged it, complaining about being tired when she wanted to go out, or pouting when she took Jalen to visit her sister without him. He made her feel guilty for choosing others over their family time, even though he spent most of that time isolated on the couch or locked away in the bedroom. Olivia, still adjusting to the exhausting demands of new motherhood, didn't push back. She rationalized Marcus's behavior as the growing pains of a man learning how to be a father to a child that wasn't biologically his. He had never signed up for this, at least not in the traditional sense. And yet, there he was, providing a roof, working long hours and staying in the picture. In her eyes, that had to count for something. But behind Marcus's steady exterior, resentment had been quietly simmering, not a burst of rage, but a slow burn, unseen, unspoken, and untreated. At work, Marcus started making comments that drew raised eyebrows from coworkers. When someone asked about the baby, Marcus would shrug. "He's not mine," he said one day with a tight smile, "just helping out." Another time, a colleague jokingly called him a stepdad, and Marcus snapped back, "Don't call me that. I didn't marry nobody." Laughter followed, but the edge in his voice left an uneasy silence hanging in the air. Marcus wasn't just jealous of Jalen. He was beginning to view him as an obstacle, an interruption, a living, breathing reminder that Olivia had loved someone else before him. In his twisted logic, Jalen wasn't a baby. He was the symbol of everything Marcus didn't have. And as the child grew, so did the distance between man and boy. Olivia never noticed how often Marcus found excuses to avoid being alone with the baby. If she needed to run to the store or step out for a moment, Marcus always had a reason not to stay. He had to leave for work early, wasn't feeling well, had things to do. She thought he was just being careful, not wanting to make a mistake or feel overwhelmed. In reality, Marcus couldn't stand being near the child. Every gurgle, every cry, every innocent smile filled him with something dark and bitter. Then came the night Olivia found Marcus standing in the doorway of the nursery, just staring. Jalen was fast asleep, a soft lullaby playing on a loop. Olivia had been passing by when she noticed Marcus frozen there, his face unreadable in the dim glow of the nightlight. She called his name softly. He didn't answer at first. When he finally turned, his face was blank. "I was just checking on him," he said, walking past her without another word. She didn't know why, but it unsettled her. Around the same time, small things began to change in their home. Olivia noticed the baby monitor was turned off some mornings, even though she always kept it running through the night. She began to find Jalen's toys moved from their usual places. Once, the soft corner protectors on the changing table had been peeled halfway off, as if someone had started removing them and stopped. She assumed she was just tired, maybe forgetful, maybe even paranoid. Sleep deprivation could play tricks on the mind. But the feeling of unease began to grow. Not loud, not obvious, just a quiet hum in her chest, like the distant sound of a siren you can't quite locate. She thought about confiding in someone, maybe her sister, but every time she tried to put the feeling into words, it sounded silly. What could she say? That her fiancé wasn't bonding with the baby? That he was distant? That he once looked at the crib for too long? None of that was evidence. None of that was enough to justify fear. But fear doesn't need proof to take root. It just needs a pause, a hesitation, her shadow at the edge of something once warm. And while Olivia still rocked her son to sleep each night and kissed Marcus goodbye each morning, she couldn't shake the thought that something was changing, not just in their relationship, but in Marcus himself. The truth was that Marcus had stopped trying to be a father long ago, and now he was starting to question whether this child had any place in his future at all. It was a gray, wind-swept October morning when the city was jolted awake by the kind of headline no one ever forgets. Around 5:30 a.m., a 911 call came in from a woman walking her dog outside a residential high-rise downtown. Her voice trembled as she told the dispatcher what she had seen. A baby, still lifeless, lying on the cold pavement just outside the front entrance of the building. When first responders arrived, the scene was quiet but harrowing. A small body lay crumpled on the concrete, a thin blue blanket partially tangled around one arm. There were no signs of life. The infant had been thrown from a deadly height, 15 stories up. The horror of it, the sheer silence of that fall, was almost too much to grasp. As police sealed off the entrance, the building's residents peered from behind curtains and doors, clutching coffee cups and cell phones, murmuring disbelief. Word spread fast. A baby had fallen, or been dropped, from one of the upper floors. Upstairs, on the 15th floor, officers knocked on the door of apartment 1504. Olivia answered, barefoot and in pajamas, her eyes wide with confusion. She had no idea what had happened. When officers asked where her son was, her face collapsed. She looked toward the nursery door and whispered that he had been in his crib just minutes earlier. The nursery was empty. The crib, lined with plush toys and a soft quilt, sat against the far wall beneath a large window, now open. The breeze drifted through, light and chilling. The curtain swayed slightly, revealing the window's safety lock had been unlatched. The blanket from the crib was missing. So was Jalen. Olivia screamed his name and ran through the apartment. Her panic was real, uncontrolled. She kept asking where he was, saying he had been fed and changed, that she had just gone to the kitchen to start the coffee. There was no forced entry, no signs of struggle. The front door had been locked, but something else caught the attention of detectives. The baby monitor, which Olivia always kept on the nightstand, had been turned off, and Marcus Hensley was nowhere to be found. His wallet, phone, and house keys were still on the kitchen counter. His shoes were gone. The security footage from the hallway revealed that Marcus had exited the apartment alone at 5:12 a.m., wearing a hoodie and dark jeans. He carried no bags, no backpack, no visible items, just himself. More troubling was the discovery that one of the building's cameras, the one facing the hallway outside the nursery, had been manually turned off the night before. A maintenance request had been filed days earlier about that specific unit showing glitches, but nothing had been done. Whether it was coincidence or planning, no one could say, but it meant there was no footage of what happened between the time Olivia fell asleep and the moment Marcus walked out the front door. Detectives canvassed the building. No one had heard any screams, no crying, no shouts. Just the wind whistling through the high corridors and the thud, unmistakable yet eerily soft, heard by the woman walking her dog. Olivia was taken to the hospital in a state of shock. She kept asking why Marcus would leave without saying anything. Where had he gone? Did he know Jalen was missing? Did he take him somewhere? But the awful truth was already sinking in. They had found her son. The medical examiner confirmed what officers already suspected. Jalen had died instantly upon impact. The injuries were consistent with a fall from a height exceeding 100 feet. In the hours that followed, police issued a bulletin. Marcus Hensley was now a person of interest in the death of Jalen Alton. But as the city braced itself for answers, one question lingered like fog in the early morning air. What kind of man walks out of a home without his wallet, his phone, or his keys after a child falls to his death just feet below the window? And why didn't he look back? The manhunt for Marcus Hensley began before sunrise had fully touched the city skyline. Detectives spread across Chicago, checking known addresses, questioning co-workers, scanning traffic cameras. Olivia remained in the hospital, sedated and surrounded by family. What had once seemed unthinkable, that someone she loved could be capable of something so monstrous, was now the only explanation that made sense. The evidence was stacking up, and it was damning detectives. Returned to the apartment that same afternoon, this time with a warrant. The goal was clear. Search for anything that could answer why Marcus had done it and where he might have gone. Olivia, still reeling from the loss of her baby, gave them full access. In the nursery, they found nothing that suggested a struggle. No blood, no broken furniture, no signs of a chaotic moment. Everything was painfully undisturbed, except for the absence of the child. In the bedroom closet, Marcus's construction boots were gone, along with a single jacket and his backpack. His side of the closet, otherwise untouched, had a small box tucked behind a stack of folded jeans. Inside were old photos, receipts, scraps of handwritten notes, and, most notably, legal documents no one had seen before. Among them was a restraining order from 5 years earlier, filed by an ex-girlfriend in Indiana. The document stated that Marcus had made verbal threats against her and her 2-year-old daughter after the relationship ended. The case had never gone to trial. The girlfriend had moved states and refused to testify. The file was closed quietly, long forgotten in the depths of the court system. Until now, investigators began to dig deeper into Marcus's background. What they found painted a troubling picture. He had no criminal convictions, but there were patterns. Brief jobs, short relationships, and a history of emotional volatility. Employers described him as polite but closed off. Co-workers used words like moody and withdrawn. Friends were hard to find. He never stayed long in one place. And now, for the second time in his life, he was involved in a situation where a child had been endangered. Only this time, the child was dead. Detectives interviewed Olivia again, asking pointed questions about Marcus's behavior in recent weeks. She hesitated at first, guilt washing over her. She admitted that she had noticed him growing colder. He had pulled away, stopped helping with the baby, even seemed irritated by Jalen's crying. 2 weeks before the fall, she had told her sister she was considering a break. She needed space. She wanted to protect her child. The only reason she hadn't left was because Marcus promised he'd change. He said he'd been stressed from work. He told her he wanted to be better. She believed him, and now that decision would haunt her for the rest of her life. In a breakthrough moment, police accessed Marcus's locker at the construction site where he worked. What they found confirmed their worst fears. Hidden in the back of the locker was a spiral notebook. Its pages were filled with chaotic writing. Some scribbled in ink, others etched hard with pencil. One phrase appeared over and over again: "Not mine equals not real." Another page read, "If he goes, she'll finally see me, and worse, erase what doesn't belong." This wasn't a sudden lapse, it was premeditated, a slow unraveling masked by silence and routine. Marcus had planned something. He had thought about it, fantasized about it. 2 days after the fall, they found him. He had been hiding in an abandoned storage facility just 6 blocks from the apartment building. He hadn't tried to run far. He was filthy, hungry, and calm. When they brought him in, he said nothing about the baby, nothing about Olivia. All he asked was whether the window had been closed again. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The monster they were chasing wasn't on the run. He had never left. The trial of Marcus Hensley became one of the most haunting court cases in recent memory. From the moment he was arrested, the public had questions. How could someone live in a home with an infant for months and then make a decision so final, so horrifying, so devoid of human empathy? But the courtroom offered little comfort. Marcus remained expressionless throughout the proceedings, his face unreadable, even as Olivia sat just feet away, trembling with grief. Prosecutors described a man consumed not by rage but by bitterness, a slow, corroding jealousy that had turned inward, poisoning him until he saw an innocent baby as a rival. They didn't portray him as a madman or a monster. Instead, they painted him as something far more chilling, ordinary. No history of diagnosed mental illness, no drug abuse, no tragic backstory, just a man who let resentment take root and grow into something lethal. The notebook found in Marcus's locker became a focal point. Forensic psychologists analyzed the writings, calling them the inner workings of a narcissist detached from empathy. The phrases repeated throughout, "Erase what doesn't belong, she'll see me," weren't the mutterings of someone out of control, but of someone who wanted control so desperately he would remove anything in his way, no matter how small or helpless. The defense, perhaps recognizing the weight of the evidence, never denied Marcus's involvement. Instead, they leaned on diminished responsibility, suggesting that Marcus had suffered a psychological breakdown. They argued that years of unresolved trauma, coupled with sudden parental responsibility, pushed him to the edge. But the jury was unconvinced. This wasn't a snap decision. The turned-off baby monitor, the unlatched window lock, the absence of any struggle, all of it suggested planning. Witnesses were called. Olivia testified through tears. She spoke about how she had trusted Marcus, how he had stepped into her life when she felt most vulnerable. She admitted to ignoring red flags, brushing aside signs of withdrawal and coldness. She said she wanted to believe he could love her child the way she did. Her words broke something in the courtroom that day. People wept, not just for her, but for every parent who ever believed love was enough to shield their child from harm. The building's maintenance manager testified that the security camera facing the hallway had been operational until the night of the incident, when it was manually disconnected. Marcus's fingerprints were found inside the camera casing. A digital forensics expert confirmed that the timestamp on the device aligned with the hours before Jalen's fall. Every thread of evidence tied back to him. When the verdict came, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Guilty, USOLDM, murder, aggravated child endangerment, tampering with evidence. The sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole, but there was no relief in the room. Justice had been served in the technical sense, but nothing could undo what had been done. A baby was still gone, a mother still haunted, a future wiped away in seconds. Olivia moved out of the apartment just weeks later. She couldn't bear the silence, the way the nursery door creaked in the morning breeze. She quit her job at the hospital and relocated to a small town upstate where no one knew her name. She spent her days planting flowers in her garden and her nights trying to forget the sound of wind through an open window. The high-riser where it all happened was quieter than ever. Residents still looked at the 15th floor with a kind of respectful fear, whispering about the morning they woke to sirens and sealed doors. The window in Unit 1504 was replaced, locked permanently. But some say that when the wind is just right and the streets are empty, you can still hear the faint hum of a lullaby drifting from above. Soft, haunting, and unfinished.